Well, hello there, tankers of the Blitz universe. I'm Flossie, and this video will be all about what are the easiest tech trees to grind in World of Tanks. So this video is for you out there, you newer players, you. I see you out there. Anyways, what are the 3 easiest tech trees to grind in my personal opinion? Well, that was kind of a difficult choice to make because there are actually a lot of good tech tree tanks available to grind down. And in this video, again, I will pick the 3 easiest to grind. What that means is the tanks from tier 7 to tier 9 are very easy to play. They have good stats overall, and they are just enjoyable to use, and they help you learn the playstyle of other vehicles in the game. So let's get right into it. And the first line I will be discussing is the T110E5 line. Now, all of these lines are not going to be in order. These are just, like, I won't be comparing them to each other. I'm just saying these are my 3 picks for the easiest lines to grind in the game. They're not in any order, like I said, so I'm just starting off with the E5 line. And we have the T29 at tier 7. Now, disclaimer, I am doing just tier 7, 8, and 9 because, of course, the lower tiers like tier 6, 5, 4, 3, whatever, they don't take that long to grind. These are the 3, like the tier 7, 8, and 9 are the ones you're going to be on for the longest amount of time. So taking a look at the T29, what does it have going for it that is good and makes it easy to grind? Well, it deals 310 damage per shot on its standard shells, which is actually pretty decent. It has very, very, very good turret armor, which is one of the main features of this entire line. You want to use your armor on the turret, especially to your advantage. As you can see here, it's easy to bounce shots from other tier 7 players. The gun handling is actually also pretty decent on this tank. It's not the best, but it's also not the worst. And it does have pretty good premium pen at about 257 on the APCR, so also pretty good. And in terms of its mobility, well, it goes 35 forward, which for a tank like this is, well, pretty solid. Again, the whole tank is very, very solid, and it always has been ever since it was released into the game. The only thing with these tanks you will find is that their reverse speed sucks. That's the whole line. The whole E5 line really struggles with its reverse speed, so you do really have to be careful of that. But that's not really what these tanks are used for. They're used for playing hull down and using your 10 degrees of gun depression, which the majority of the tanks in this line carry. So you want to use your good armor and pair that with your 10 degrees of gun depression, and it's just super easy to work these tanks on pretty much every map, which is what you want as a newer player. You don't want some unflexible vehicle to play. So that's the T29. Moving on to the second tank of the E5 tech tree, the T32. Now, what does this tank have that is pretty solid? Well, like the T29, this tank has very good gun depression at 10 degrees. As well, it also carries a strong turret, just like the T29. So you are able to use most ridge lines on any map you desire to sit hull down and just farm your enemies. It does have decent penetration now after Wargaming did buff it a little while ago. One of the main downsides of this tank used to be its penetration, but now its premium pen is about 278 and its APCR, so that's actually pretty solid. And I will say the gun handling on this tank can be sometimes like troll. You do have to watch out for that. I mean, that's similar to all of the tanks in this line, but this one especially, I find that the gun is very troll on. So you do want to make sure you are fully aiming your shots in with it. Its mobility is actually pretty solid though. It goes 35 forward, just like the T29. However, its reverse speed is also quite bad, like the T29 and the rest of the tanks in this tech tree, like I said before. Its DPM is 2100, so not terrible there, and it deals 310 damage a shot. So just like the T29, its DPM and average damage are fairly decent, and you're going to be quite annoying if you can get into a hull down spot and just pepper your opponents. Yeah, it's very annoying to come up against T32 players that know what they're doing because it's such a difficult tank to deal with. Another thing I forgot to add earlier is that this entire line has sandbag armor, which means you are just straight up at an advantage for HP, which is very good, and I recommend everyone put sandbag armor on. Just use it. It's super, super useful, especially in those endgame situations when you want that extra HP. And here we arrive at the tier 9 of the E5 tech tree. Now, like I said earlier in this video, I will not be reviewing the tier 10s of any of these lines, just take it from me, all of the tier 10s in all of these lines are very good. There's not a bad tier 10 for any of these 3 lines that I will be showcasing. So the M103, the tier 9, it is fantastic. Definitely one of my favorite tier 9s in all of Blitz. It has insane heat pen at 384. It has the same heat pen as the E5, which is just kind of crazy. It deals around 400 alpha damage on its standard shells, which is also very solid. Just the gun on this tank is fantastic, and there's nothing that you can go wrong with. Like, you just can't go wrong with the gun on this thing. It has 8 degrees of gun depression, so you do lose some gun depression from the other tanks in this line, but honestly 8 degrees is still enough to use that really good turret armor to sit hull down. Again, like all of the tanks in this line, their main gameplay style is to hide your hull behind cover and sit hull down, only showing your turret when possible. The mobility on this tank is also solid, like the other 3 tanks, or the other 2 tanks, sorry. It goes 34 forward, but it has very bad reverse speed, again, like all of the other tanks. However, that doesn't really matter. It does have a decent DPM of 2300, and I'm going to be saying the word decent a lot because all of the tanks in this line are just decent. They're very good. So yeah, 2300 DPM, can't go wrong with that. And honestly, what really makes this tank strong, like I said before, is that insane heat penetration. Means that even some tier 10s, you can just sit hull down and farm them out because you don't have to worry about, oh, can I pen this guy in a certain angle or a certain spot? No, you can pen them pretty much everywhere. So that's the M103 for you. Fantastic vehicle to end off the E5 tech tree line. So here we are on tech tree number 2, and what did I choose? Well, I chose the 60 TP line. There are a number of good reasons why this tech tree has always been very strong since it came into the game, and one of those reasons is the fact that all of the tanks from tier 7 to tier 10 have tungsten shells, gear oil, as well as gunpowder, so you have lots of things to choose from, and that makes them not only unique to play, but also very strong, because tungsten shells is one of the strongest consumables in the game right now. And what that does, in fact, is it increases your alpha damage. So a tank like the 45 TP, which I'm showcasing right now, that normally has 290 alpha damage, now has upwards of 320, 330. It's very good alpha. And it goes with all of, like I said, all the tier 7 to 10 tanks in this line. They all have tungsten shells. Another thing, like I mentioned earlier, gear oil. That is super important for these tanks, and it really makes them strong. What does it do? Well, it increases your mobility. So not only do you have more alpha damage with your tungsten shells when you pop that, you have a constant ability to have more mobility. All of these tanks can go upwards of 19 reverse, which is absolutely amazing. Having good reverse speed on tanks like these that have decent armor makes them super strong, because you can get out of situations very quickly, as well as you can like wiggle back and forth, making it more troll for the enemies to pen you. Overall, in terms of the gun handling and stats of this gun, it deals 290 damage, like I said, normally, so that's okay. Not the best. This tank, I'm not gonna lie to you, is kind of boring. It's definitely the most boring of the 3 tanks I will talk about in this tech tree, so you just want to get past this one as quick as you can. It's not a bad tank, it's just very average and very boring. It has okay gun handling, but it's nothing really crazy. The whole line does kind of suffer from having very troll guns, I will say that right now. But it makes up for it because this tank has decent DPM. It has decent gun handling, like I said, although a little bit troll, and its mobility is very solid. Now, the armor profile on this tank is nothing special. You don't really want to rely on it. The turret is strong, but you do have a very large hatch that people will shoot at, and yeah, they'll be able to easily cut through that. So you just want to be careful playing this tank. Although it is a heavy and it has lots of HP, you don't want to be YOLOing the front line in it. Just be careful playing this tank and you will do fine in it. Next up in the 60 TP line is the 53 TP. Now this is actually one of my favorite tier 8 tech tree heavy tanks in the entire game. It's so good, and I think it used to be like comp. Not that tier 8 comp's all that exciting, but this tank used to be used in tier 8 competitive from what I'm aware. It has a fantastic gun with crazy alpha damage at 420 without popping tungsten. So that alpha damage with tungsten shells is absolutely ridiculous. Now the tank does kind of suffer on its DPM. It only has about 1800 DPM, which is again very mid, but The alpha damage kind of makes up for that. You are trading all of your DPM in these tanks for alpha damage that slaps your opponents around. The mobility on this tank is absolutely incredible. It goes 40 forward without speed boost, or not speed boost, gear oil, and it also hits a top speed of like 20 in reverse, 21 in reverse with that gear oil added. It's just incredible how quick a tank like this goes forward and in reverse, because this tank has such good armor. Normally you think of a tank that has good armor as being a super slow, kind of not mobile tank at all, but these tanks in this line are super mobile for what they are. And honestly, the accuracy is kind of it's kind of troll like the rest of the tanks in this line. You do have to be careful about them being super troll, like I said. But when you fully aim in, the dispersion is actually okay on this tank. So what else does it have going for it? Well, it's 278 millimeters of premium pen is very, very solid indeed, and it's enough to cut through most tier 8s and some tier 9s that you need to. You do have to be a little bit careful when fighting tier 9 opponents, because obviously having premium APCR is, in my opinion, not as good as heat. So just be careful about that. The pen is good, but you will struggle against some tier 9 tanks. Like the tier 7, this tank also has 8 degrees of gun depression, so you can work most ridge lines. And since the turret armor is insanely good on this tank, keeping it hull down will be what makes you super strong on the battlefield. You want to keep this tank hull down as much as you can, although the hull armor on this tank isn't all that bad. You just have to watch out for the little mid plate here / lower plate. That is its weak spot right there. But yeah, overall, very, very solid tank. And finally, we are at the tier 9 of the 60 TP line, the 50 TP. Now, this tank, like the other tanks, has decent gun depression at 8 degrees. It has very, very, very good turret armor. Oh my god, the turret armor on this tank is kind of insane. So sitting hull down in this tank is where you're going to do best. Now, in terms of its mobility, because this tank also has gear oil, you can go up to about 40 with gear oil, improved gear oil to be exact, which is very, very good. And honestly, its reverse speed is also fantastic, like the other tanks in this line. It has okay premium pen at 318 on the APCR, which it'll be enough to cut through the majority of tier 10s. You might struggle up against like super, super heavily armored tanks like the Type 71 or the, I don't know, E100. Tanks like that, you'll kind of struggle, but other than that, you will be fine. The gun handling is good when fully aimed in. However, its dispersion, or not dispersion, its aim time is very, very long. It has like 4.7 seconds of aim time. Like, it's really, really bad on its aim time. So make sure you fully aim in on its gun when you're shooting with it, and you'll do fine. It does have 460 alpha damage without its tungsten shells, and that's very, very nice. Like, the alpha damage on this tank can really scare your enemy opponents, especially if you're fighting tier 8s like we are here. You can see that 575 max roll is kind of crazy. It has okay DPM at 2k, nothing special, but again, all of the tanks in this line are sort of focusing on their alpha damage more so than their DPM. And yeah, overall, fantastic tank, one of the stronger tier 9 tanks in the game right now, and yeah, nothing to really complain about it. Now, when you are playing this tank, the main weakness obviously on the armor profile is the lower plate. It has a very, very big lower plate, as well as the hatch on its turret can be penned fairly easily, but if you're able to hide at least the lower plate, your armor profile will be very, very effective. And here we are on the third and final tech tree of today's video, and I am of course talking about the E100 line, starting off with the Tiger 1. Now, all of these tanks have a really special place in my heart for Blitz, because these were in fact the first tanks I grinded in terms of heavy tanks. It was just an absolute amazing line to grind, and I always recommend the E100 line for newer players, as they just have a very, very solid balance of armor profile to gun damage ratio. That's a made-up ratio, but having good alpha damage at the higher tiers plus a ton of armor really sets these tanks apart from other vehicles in the game. And starting off with the Tiger 1, This tank doesn't have good alpha damage, which is kind of weird because it's literally going against what I said for the rest of the line. It has 220 damage per shot on its standard. So yeah, it's more of a pepper and good DPM kind of vehicle because the DPM is very good. It has 2,200 DPM, which for a heavy tank at tier 7 is really, really, really good. Its gun handling is pretty solid. It has very bad aim time, but its dispersion makes up for it. So if you do aim in your shells enough, you won't be missing too many shots in this tank. It has 7 degrees of gun depression, which is about the same as the rest of the tanks in this line, so that's also very good. And it has very, very, very good mobility for what it is. It goes 44 forward, which is fantastic. Its reverse speed lacks a little bit, but it's still decent enough. Now, the armor profile, it used to be better. I will say, like, power creep kind of killed off a bit of the armor profile's strength on this tank, so you have to be careful with it because even angling it enough, you can still get penned, especially in tier 8 matchups. So yeah, the armor is not really that great, but it does get you used to angling, and if you do angle this tank properly, you can still get a bounce every once in a while. Its premium penetration is also pretty solid at 249 on its APCR, so that's pretty solid there. And overall, it's just a great tank. You can't go wrong with the Tiger 1 at tier 7. Up next in the E100 line, we do in fact have the Tiger 2, and this tank is absolutely amazing. It has so many good things going for it. So let's break right into that. So starting off with its gun, it deals about 310 alpha damage, on its standard shells, and it has very, very good premium penetration at 299 on its APCR. So what that means is you don't exactly have the highest alpha damage at tier 8, but it does mean you do have really good DPM because having lower alpha damage tanks usually means you have more DPM, and this tank is no exception. It has about 2,300 DPM, which for a tier 8 heavy tank like this is very, very good. And again, pairing that with its great premium penetration, it means that when you are facing tier 9 tanks especially, you will not have very much trouble penning them at all. It's fantastic having a tank with such good armor paired with very, very good gun handling and good penetration, good DPM. Like, overall, this tank is just very good in general. Like, there's nothing that's really bad about it. And especially after Wargaming did buff the armor profile on this tank a little while ago, its armor is fantastic. It really, really is. It holds up its own even in tier 9 battles. Although, I mean, this game, I don't really bounce too many shells, but for the most part, you will get a lot of bounces in this tank if you do play it. Its mobility is also pretty good. 35 forward is not all that sluggish, especially for a tank, again, with this much armor. It also has 7 degrees of gun depression like the Tiger 1. So yeah, very, very good tank in general. And it's honestly, it was one of my favorite tier 8s to play when I was grinding tanks in this game. It's just an absolute blast to play. And again, there's nothing bad about it. So for newer players, that is what you want. You want a tank that is good in all aspects, especially in a heavy tank like this. And here we finally arrive at the final tank I will be taking a look at in today's video, the E75, which is obviously the tier 9 of the E100 line. This tank is basically just a beefed up Tiger 2 in almost every way. First off, its armor profile. It is absolutely insane. The armor on this tank holds up against tier 10s, which is just so stupid. Even if you angle it a little bit, the lower plate just becomes super red and very, very difficult for tanks to pen, especially if they don't load premium shells, which for whatever reason, a lot of people just don't like loading premium ammo in this game. So I don't know what to say about that. It has very, very, very good alpha damage, especially comparing it to the Tiger 2. Its alpha damage increase is great. It's 460 alpha, which means it just slaps a lot harder. But as you can see here, the gun handling, it's good to an extent. It has a very, very bad aim time. So you do want to make sure you are fully aiming in with this tank to allow your gun to actually get accurate. Like, basically, if you are not fully aiming in this tank, you will not be all that accurate, and you'll find the gun can be very troll. The DPM on this tank is actually also very solid for what it is, which kind of just adds into the good factor of the gun, because having 460 alpha paired with decent DPM just makes this really enjoyable to use. And again, 7 degrees of gun depression is what you will use, or what you will find on this tank as well, like the others in this line. And the premium pen is also fantastic. 327 APCR premium pen is very, very good. It's actually better than some mediums at tier 10, which means you will not struggle to pen a lot of tanks at tier 10. You will struggle against some super heavies, but for the most part, the pen on this tank is fantastic. Its mobility is also pretty decent. It goes 40 forward, so yes, that's very good forward speed. Its reverse speed lacks a little bit like the rest of the tanks in this line, but overall, this tank is fantastic, and in my opinion, it is one of the strongest tier 9s in the entire game right now. It's so good. And especially against tier 8s, you will find a lot of people just won't even be able to pen you at all. It's just ridiculous. And for that reason, I think that this deserves to be the tech tree that I chose for number 3 on the easiest tech trees to play in the entire game. Just the whole tech tree for this tank. It's super well armored, has okay stats in terms of mobility, and it has pretty decent guns. All the tanks play similar except for the E100. That one takes a little bit of getting used to, especially when it comes to using its armor profile properly, but that is for another video. I will do a review on the E100 eventually. But yes, fantastic vehicles in this tech tree. I can't recommend them enough. And that is it. That is all 3 of the tech tree tanks that I have chosen to include in today's video for being the easiest to grind for newer players. All of them are heavy tanks, which kind of makes sense as heavy tanks are usually the easiest class to do well in. And all of them have their own unique abilities like sandbag armor on the E5, very good armor on the E100, as well as just good stats in general. You can't go wrong with the E100 line, and tungsten shells, not super speed boost, gear oil on the 60 TP, and gunpowder giving you better shell velocity as well. So yeah, all 3 of these tech tree tanks are fantastic at tier 10 as well. I have a review on the E5. I don't think I have a review on the other 2 tanks, but I will make a review on those in the future. But just trust me, the lines for these tanks are super easy to grind, and I can't recommend them enough. So hopefully you all enjoyed today's video. For any of you out there who are not yet subscribed to my channel, I highly recommend you do so, as it's a great way to support my content, as well as stay up to date when I post more videos like these almost every day. And with that, I will see you all in the next one. Bye-bye.